I'm Dave Test. I'm one of a whole bunch of project directors for NTACT. We're the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. Well, I'll get there. Our big goal is really to, what I want you to learn today and get information about is to get knowledge about the process that we use in terms of identifying and then classifying what we call evidence-based, research-based, and promising practices. And then get a feel for a little bit about how we are trying to do some of our knowledge translation stuff, which I think we still need to do better on. But let me give you a little bit of background. No, you don't have it in. I didn't put it in here. Okay. So how many of you know what NTACT is? Oh, that's good. Okay. We are funded, and I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow, but we're funded primarily by OSAP, Office of Special Education Programs, but we also have about 1/6 of our funding comes from RSA, and so we are the first technical assistance center that has ever been jointly funded. So we've had, for the first year, which was last year, we were scrutinized heavily. This year we've got all the new 6 transition centers, and a couple of them, WinTAC and YTAC, and some of those centers that are focused on transition, some of the pressure's off of us. But we're basically about, our primary objective is to identify and disseminate evidence-based and promising practices for students with disabilities. Our target audiences are state-level VR folks, state-level Department of Ed folks, local VR, and local state, local special ed. So that's those are our primary audiences, and then we have 5 goals around increased use of practices that get kids into college, increased use of good practices that get kids into employment, sort of general transition stuff, transition assessment, transition planning, the indicators, if you're familiar with the special ed indicators, we do those indicator stuff, and then a piece on dropout prevention or school completion. So that's the big piece. So that's one of the reasons we care about evidence-based practices. So as our big purpose, and what I just said. Why do we care about them? Well, there is evidence to show that when practices, when teachers, I come mostly from the special ed side, when practices that have research behind them have been done effectively, students perform better. Okay? So as a result, we feel practitioners need trustworthy resources to tell them what to do, that have the best available level of evidence, the best available evidence. Okay? And that's why we have multiple levels of evidence. Because if we just went with evidence-based, there'd be very little for anybody to do, or any practices for anybody to use. So we're trying to widen the field. When NTACT was NSTAC, and we've been the OSEP TA Center on Transition since 2006. And so we had been looking at evidence-based practices, but primarily around special education. With the new wider audiences, you'll see that we've expanded our audiences to not only special ed, but to VR, career tech ed, and the group that is interested in school completion. So we've gone to a much larger audience in terms of looking at practices. And I'm going to be talking about practices and predictors. So let me just say practices are interventions that typically are carried out in a school, a classroom, or the community, and they come from experimental research. They're usually based on experimental research. I'll also be talking about predictors, and those when we first did practices, so we would have a practice like using constant time delay to teach leisure skills. And then, so our teachers would say to us, so if I do this, they'll have better post-school outcomes. We said, no. This will help the kid learn the skill, but we can't tell you about whether it'll lead to better post-school outcomes. So we went back to the literature, and the only literature that we had at the time was correlational research. So we went back to the literature to get the correlational research to look at predictors, and we've identified predictors. So the matrix that you'll see later has both the practices and the predictors infused into the same place. So I'm going to talk to you about our process of how we identify and then how we push them out. Okay, so the first thing we do is a large literature search. And I already talked to Trent and Michael from this morning. They're going to lend us the literature they did on the 61 to 26 practices and so we have that as a nice starting point too. But we've already incorporated, as you'll see, their practices from the 2013 JVR articles into the matrix. When we do a literature search, it's three major components. The first one, for researchers, it's the independent variable. For teachers and VR counselors, it's the intervention. So what do you do? Then what does it improve? What's the target outcome? Is it teaching literacy skills? Is it teaching employment skills? Is it teaching self-determination skills? What's the outcome? Or the dependent variable. And then with whom? And most of our practices are not specific to a disability area, mostly because there's not a lot of research, enough research in a specific disability area. So they're fairly generic in terms of students with disabilities. So that's the first thing, we do this large literature search, or as was talked about this morning, you go find your doctoral students to do the work for you. I'm all into that too. So then we sort based on the types of study. And until recently, we basically looked at experimental research and correlational research. Now we've widened that view to also look at qualitative research. We just had to go that way, partly because of the stuff that came out of the JVR article. We needed to get that included. So a lot on the special ed side, we use single case designs. There's a whole set of, in 2005, in the journal Exceptional Children, there was a special issue that looked at how do you identify evidence-based practices? What are the quality indicators for group experimental, single case designs, correlational, and qualitative? And so we've gone back to those in terms of our quality indicator checklists and getting that information. So we'll do the literature search, we'll split them out into the types of research. Also, are they for transition age kids? And we are just looking at transition age kids, and our definition, that is from 11 to 22 usually, sometimes 26, but usually 11 to 22 and are still in school and still in high school. They may, if they're being served on a college campus, but they're still in high school, then if the study that's where it took place, we can count that. But if it's on a college campus where they've left high school or graduated, then even if they're in the age, that doesn't count. They're not part of our sample. So then we look at the quality indicators, and we go back to that 2005 issue in Exceptional Children that laid it out for the different types of research. Then we count how many high quality or acceptable studies there are to support the practice. And then we compare to criteria to determine the final level of evidence. I think that's pretty much the way most levels of evidence are done nowadays. So I don't think it's anything radical here. So, as I already said, our quality indicators are based on the stuff from Exceptional Children. as an aside, we just had, when I teach the single case course in our doctoral program, the single case research class, and I have them do evidence-based practice studies. And we had occasionally they'll submit them for publication. And we had a reviewer tell us that these 2005 standards were probably out of date. And I kind of wondered, how can that be? Because these are, for good research, I mean, what's good quality research doesn't seem, I don't think it changes over time. So it was kind of an interesting, do we need another set of standards? I mean, they'd be the same. It's kind of weird. But anyways, that's the one reviewer you just kind of ignore, I guess. So those are if you want to see what those are, it's the transitionta.org. And those are all there for you to look at. Here's the single case one for single case designs. It looks at the participants, and this is pretty much straight from the Horner et al. Article in 2005. It looks at how well the participants described. It looks at the dependent variables. Is it operationalized? How is it measured? Does it give it a quantifiable index? Is it done over time because it's a single case design? And then was there reliability collected on it? Then in terms of independent variable, how well is it described? Was it systematically manipulated and under the control of the experimenter, which, that's what experimental research is all about. And then was there a measurement of treatment fidelity. And that last piece, if you go back in the special education literature and look at a lot of special education literature, that's what's not there in a lot of the earlier studies, and even today, which is kind of weird. Then we look at baseline. Were there enough data points? Does it establish a trend? Then experimental control. Do you have the 3 demonstrations of effect that you need to make things to get a functional relation? Was it replicated across participants or settings? And then social validity. This one, as NTACT, we've kind of said, the reason you might have noticed earlier I said high quality or acceptable. Okay, high quality would include them all. Acceptable quality for us, you don't have to have all 4 of those social validity things because the odds of you finding all 4 of those are slim and basically none. You don't find all 4 variables. But if you can get one, we're okay with that. And actually, when the Council for Exceptional Children did their set of standards, it's a set of standards that looks at both, combines group and single case designs into one big rubric. They left social validity out altogether, which was an interesting outcome. So there are checklists for group experimental, for qualitative. The qualitative one's been interesting. We've had to go to a number of different qualitative experts, and if you're a qualitative expert and you want to look at it, I'll send it to you, or you can go on the website and give us your feedback, because we're still struggling with that because there's so many different types, and how do you do that for every type? We've also, well, come to that. And then the one for correlational. And the correlational one, we've had some work done on too. So, our levels of evidence. It really refers to the amount and quality of research, and it really breaks down to how confident can we be in our findings. So that evidence-based practices, we are pretty confident that these practices will produce either better outcomes or will effectively teach the students the behaviors that you want them to. Research-based practice, a little less confidence. Promising practices, not as much. And unestablished, we have this category for unestablished, but if you click on the link, nothing comes up other than implement the treatment with fidelity, take data to see whether it works. Okay? We're not going to identify practices that don't have any evidence. We don't want people using those. Okay, we would rather they go to use the practices that have the best available evidence from the beginning. But if they can't find one on our list, which they may not be able to, we certainly don't cover all the bases yet. And that's your guys' job. Get the research done, please. But if you're going to use one of those practices that doesn't have a level of evidence, then do it with fidelity. If you know what the fidelity, if you've been told how to do it, hopefully you got information on how to do it. But then collect data. Are the students, they learning this skill? And then if it's not working, don't use it anymore. So it's the quantity and quality that moves you up and down that scale. Actually moves you up. I don't think you could back out of it. So here we go. These are our levels of evidence, and I'm glad this is a huge screen, although this is very intimidating to be standing down here. This is what we've used. It's been tinkered with over time. It originally started, a lot of it was based on what came out of those Exceptional Children articles and what they recommended. And some of it came out of IES and the What Works Clearinghouse, and so we've kind of, we're using both sets. But with group experimental, it's too high quality, and then you've got all the footnotes down here, and you have to go back. You have to know what the quality indicator checklists look like, because there's certain items that it's either all or most, and which items are listed here. But so you can high quality, two high quality, or a combination of four high and acceptable quality studies. Studies must calculate effect size or report the data to be able to do that. And there's no evidence from higher acceptable quality studies demonstrating negative effects. Okay. Single case designs, it's 5 high or acceptable, 3 independent research teams. If you know the single case design studies, you know that Horner suggested at least 20 students, but we've ignored that. And then no negative effects, no studies with negative effects. Here's a change that we've made in the last year or so as we've found out more about propensity score matching or modeling. We are now including that with high quality, and then when you go to the correlational checklist, you'll see a set of items there that look at propensity score matching and what are quality indicators for good studies that use that. And so if they do that, if they meet that, we can push them up to evidence-based practices. And we've run that by, well, Jay Rajewski from Career Tech Ed was one of the people that helped us think this through, and then we've gotten some of the folks from the NLTS2, the National Longitudinal Transition Study, folks, Mary Wagner and Lynn Newman have provided feedback, and so far we haven't got any real strong kickback on this. This seems to be acceptable to at least the people we talk to. But I'm open to more discussion. So we're, by using the strong, well done propensity score matching study. So it was really interesting to see Fong's stuff this morning. I'll definitely have to follow up on some of that research. But again, we're just interested in transition age folks, so that may get in the way. So that's evidence-based. That's the gold standard. That's what we're shooting for, but when you look at our matrix, there's not going to be much there. Then the next level is research-based, and we're starting to back off the requirements, the number of high quality, the number of acceptable quality. Okay? So that's why we have a little bit less confidence in these. Because the research just isn't, there's not as much or it's not as rigorous. So it's 2 studies using rigorous research designs demonstrating positive effects, may or may not have been reviewed for the quality indicators. More studies using rigorous designs showing positive effects. It's the same stuff in there about the effect size. Single case, a few, not as many studies. 2 independent research teams, and correlational. This used to be the highest level we had with correlational. You couldn't get into evidence-based practice. Research-based practice is the highest you could go. And it's really based on the a priori stuff, that you go in with a hypothesis. You're not just going fishing. It's not like you throw all your variables into the lake out there and then see what comes out. You can't use those. They've got to be a priori studies. So those are studies that meet this criteria, fall into evidence-based practice or research-based practice. And then our latest level is the promising practices. And here you see, just a lot less in terms of quality and quantity. And then, as I said, I talked about unestablished practices. Any thoughts on what? Does it make sense? Are we being too hard? Are we being too easy? Couldn't care less. In which case, what the heck are you doing in here? Were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I am on your website at least once a week, and I think it's fabulous. And even though you have a job and get paid for it, thank you for what you've done.
Okay. She said wonderful things about it. When we put stuff out, we try to be as transparent as possible in terms of here's what we do, here are all our forms, here are all our criteria. Now, you decide how trustworthy and usable they are. So that's where we've got in terms of level of evidence, the different criteria. So what has all this led to? Well, at this point, give or take, we've got about 127 practices, got about 19 predictors, although, as I'll tell you at the end, that probably is going to change pretty quickly. We've organized them by relevant transition areas in terms of education, employment, and independent living. Why did we do that?
That's what the IEPs
Yeah, that's what in terms of IEPs, in terms of post-school goals, you have to have one in terms of education, employment, and if necessary, independent living. So that's why we've tried to sort it that way. And then we try to, but I've already said, is when you talk about the population, it tends to be generic. Just because there's just not enough research with all students with learning disabilities or all students with severe disabilities or in a specific IDEA category, there's just not enough for some practices. So they tend to be generic, which is probably a weakness of our matrix, but it's what it is. Okay, so where do you find this stuff? Well, it's on our website, transitionta.org. If you come to the website, you can't see that. I can hardly see it. There are 4 tabs across the top. Okay, resources, effective practices, events, and the one that nobody ever goes to about us. So you would click on effective practices, and you come to this page. Okay, the matrix is here. If you want to look at just what practices are evidence-based or research-based or promising, you can click on those tabs and get the information there. But the matrix, to me, the matrix is where you would want to start. And here's why. I noticed this yesterday, and it won't be there when you go to this website. It won't be there. But it was there when I copied and pasted it in, and I didn't even notice. I'm checking it right now. Okay. And this isn't all of them. This is just, but each of those links, those blue underlying links, is what you think it is. They're clickable. And you can find out, you can click on those links to find out more information about how to do that intervention. So this is where we're going in terms of knowledge translation. So we've identified them, we've given you their evidence level, and if you could, some people care less about what the level of evidence is, but if they see it on this matrix, and it's something that is in the student's IEP, or if you're going to teach a lot of the interesting stuff in evidence, which is unfortunately behind that screenshot, are self-determination interventions. There's some really powerful self-directed IEP, self-advocacy strategy, self-determined learning model of instruction, whose future is it? Those are all evidence-based curricula that have been used to teach self-advocacy and self-determination. So as VR counselors do the pre-ETS stuff, or the pre-ETS, there are practices for them to use and be taken into classrooms, and recommend that if they're contracting someone to do that stuff, they use those curriculum. So, those are all clickable links. And there are just more. These are not all of them, but you can find them on the website. But here, you're starting to see, oh, I didn't catch any. A lot of the VR stuff, all the stuff that Roy put up on those 2 slides from the study, the 213 study, those are all on our website under promising practices. And there are a couple, like self-determination is either research or evidence-based, because they've got a really solid research base behind them. So there are a number of these practices. If you're on the matrix, you'll see they're specifically VR practices. We've tried to get career tech ed in there. We're having a really hard time finding anything, and people keep saying there's nothing there, but we don't believe them. So we'll keep looking. And then there's a whole set that is on school completion stuff. But you see they're divided into, we were originally going to do it in columns, like special ed, voc rehab, career tech ed, and then we decided, nope, that still keeps it siloed. And let's just do it by potentially outcomes and put everything in, all the across discipline into the same category, which then you just, then you don't have to, if you're a VR counselor and you come, you might be tempted to just look at the VR ones. This way you're going to look at them all. Okay? At least we hope you do. So what happens if you click on one of those links? Well, you go to a practice description, okay? Which honestly, they're okay. What is really good is if you go to where's the best place to find out to do this practice, that links you to the lesson plan or lesson plans to do that. And those lesson plans were written by our graduate assistants based on the studies that implemented those interventions. So the description will talk a little bit about it and how to do it, but it'll link you to the lesson plan library. On the old NTACT website, it was easy there was a lesson plan library link, and that's coming back so that you can easily get to the lesson plan library. Here, now you have to do it by clicking on the matrix, going to practice description. It's too many clicks. We're going to try to fix that. But again, we talk about who's been implemented with, because most folks, most teachers, and I'd imagine VR counselors are going to know, is this going to work with the kids that I'm going to be working with, or the young adults? So we try to, make sure that information is in there to describe the practice. But then this is the research. This is an example of a research to practice lesson plan, and they're really research to practice lesson plan starters, because every school system has a different way of doing lesson plans, but every lesson plan has an objective. It'll have the materials and maybe where you're going to do it if you're not going to do it in your classroom. It'll have the teaching procedure, it'll have the skill that you're going to teach, and it'll have a way to evaluate whether the students have learned that skill or not. And so that's the information on the lesson plan starters that you'll see. You'll see what's the objective. The teacher can immediately write that into the lesson plan. Here's the materials you're going to need to do it. Here's a task analysis of the skill you're going to teach. And then here's the teaching procedure to teach that skill. And then hopefully, it's a longer one, and then hopefully you'll do some evaluation on whether the students are learning the skill or not. And here's a simple way to do that. So all this information can quickly be taken and put into somebody's lesson plan. And for years, the research to practice lesson plan has been our #1 link that has been hit. It's the section of the website that has been the most hittable or linkable, or I don't know, whatever the terminology is. Right now, for the VR ones that we pulled off of the RRTC for EBP and VR, off of those studies, we have, this is what we have. We have the level of evidence that comes out of our review, but also a description of the practice, and then the best place to find it. Part of it is going back to the original article, but right now, and I don't know how many calls you guys have gotten, hopefully not too many, but there has been an agreement that if you really want to find out, you can get in touch with this center. Or I guess it's not this center, but the center. But we would like to build this part of it, to have more detail behind this on the practices. So if you know how to help us do that, we have plenty of resources to do it. Well, not plenty, but we have some resources. We have some graduate assistants that'll do it. But that's what's there for the VR stuff right now. And I would think that as more and more VR counselors find us, they're going to want probably a little bit more detail. So if there's a way we can figure out how to provide that detail, that would be great. Okay, so in addition to just to the matrix and the evidence-based practice descriptions and the lesson plans, here's some other things that you can find on that section of the website. We've done tables because in the past we had the predictors and the practices in separate places. We have a simple table that lists all of our predictors and which outcomes they've been associated with in terms of the research. These are all there. The quality indicator checklists. There's a literature map on dropout prevention strategies. Links to the RRTC-EBP VR. And then we're revising the NTACT executive summary as we speak. We also have, and this is just some of them, there are topics that educators and VR counselors are interested in that may not have much experimental or correlational or qualitative research. They just have, they're talked about, or there may be some descriptive stuff. So what we try to do is identify, or we've identified and the field has identified for us topics that they want more information about. So we've started and been updating and doing new ones and what we call our annotated bibliographies, and they're just that on specific topics. And there's more than this, but this is just a start. This last one, if you're talking about large databases, the NLTS2 database, there's a community of practice around that. And if you're interested in getting that, just email me and I can get you into it. But they have done a summary of all the studies. I mean, it's an annotated bibliography of all the studies that have ever been done using the NLTS2 database. How cool is that? Okay. They thought they had it narrowed down, and then they found an extra 30 in the last couple of weeks. So there's a lot of them, but it's all there. So we've got the annotated bibliographies, and we find master's degree students and doctoral students kind of like this part because they can get ideas and good background for literature reviews for chapter 1 and 2. We also we're the transition center. We are not the PBIS center. We're not the RTI center. Our expertise is not in mental health. There are other centers that do that kind of thing. So what we've done is partner with some of those centers to do these, what we're calling quick guides. And they're kind of like, for this topic, why is it important to transition? Is there any research on it? And then what are some resources for teachers, for VR counselors, for administrators, for families, for students? And then we'll have a sentence description or so of what the link is, and then a link to it. So not linking them, not to our website, but to websites, and directly to places on those websites, not just the home page where they're now where do I go? But to a specific spot on that website that'll give them information. So we've been developing, we've got 2 more, one on UDL and one on with mental health that should be posted in a week or so. We're waiting final approval from our project officers. Since we haven't heard from them, we're going to put them up there. So we've got these quick guides, and every single one of them has a category for resources and things that VR counselors would be interested in addition to the other audiences. So the search continues, and you're going to get out of here early. We have the folks at the University of Oregon are Don Rowe and Val Mazzotti are kind of have taken over the literature review search part of it, which is wonderful. And right now they have about 181 articles that they have found. Although I think when we get the stuff from Trent and Michael, that'll probably expand it a little bit. But it looks like we're going to have some more support for the wages curriculum, which has been out there for a while now. Peer supports. It looks like there's some self-management strategies, some family engagement strategies, which there are very few. Like that, when you look, we used to sort of use the taxonomy. It's similar to the guideposts, but it's the taxonomy. It comes from the special ed side. But in that, you've got a couple of areas. Family involvement and interagency collaboration. There's not much research, and there are very few practices in those areas. So it's really nice to see some strategies coming out in terms of getting families involved and family engagement. And then self-determination, it's not too surprising. There are a lot of interventions. There's been a lot of focus on self-determination to see that happening. Also, paid employment as a predictor and self-determination as a predictor. We already know those are predictors. I guess there's more research. And it looks like there may be some other predictors coming out. And I think we need to come back and look at the VR literature too there after this morning. I think there may be some there that we have not, we should be finding. So that's us. We finally come into the 21st century. We have a Pinterest site. I'm finally on Twitter. I signed up for Twitter. I still haven't signed up for Facebook though. I tried, but they wanted me to use my real name. And when I put David Test in there, they didn't. They kept coming back to me. Please use your real name. David Test. Please use your real name. So I gave up. Actually, I didn't. They made me send a picture ID with my name. But by that time, my wife had been on it, so I didn't need to get on it. So anyway, there's a number of ways. If you're not on our listserv, let us know. You can get on through the website, but if not, you can just give me your email and I get you onto it. We promise not to inundate you, but that's our process, and so our process is it's a process that everybody seems to use in terms of identifying our criteria. We tried to be as close as possible and stay as close as possible to, strong, academically defensible criteria. We're going out a little bit out on a limb with qualitative stuff, although, and then the propensity score modeling stuff. But I don't see any way around it. I think we need to be looking at all different types of research and how they can contribute to the evidence base. What is the best available evidence? That's what counselors and that's what teachers need to know, and administrators and people who select curriculum. That's what they need to have, the best available evidence, and know what the best available evidence is. So this is what we've been doing it. We're trying to do it across special ed, both rehab, career tech ed, and school completion. So the extent that if you see, we've missed something, just let us know. We would love to work with you to help make this even better. So if you have any questions, comments, otherwise go out and get some more sun. Steve.
I'm so thankful for the work that I'm seeing NTACT doing, moving from the NTACT model to the NTACT. I think for those of us in the VR world, one of our main concerns was the loss of our cases, and that's where we would typically go on the VR side for that kind of technical assistance and support. So it's been something that I've really been encouraging and pushing to keep the visibility that NTACT is our vocational rehabilitation world's technical assistance center to transition, particularly at this time of pre-employment transition services. So to take you up on your offer, what do we need to do to help NTACT continue to build the resources on the VR side, knowing that kind of coming from the NTACT special ed side, and now in some ways we're kind of new to the infrastructure itself. So what do we need to do to help you in assuring that you're getting the resources that you need to really support us in the work that we're doing back in the States?
Okay. So can the online people have heard that? Okay. So he's asking what, this is for the people that are supposed to be watching. It's probably that one person, so hi. He's asking what can you all do, what can the field do to make sure that we have the most up-to-date VR resources. And so I guess there's a couple things. One is as we do our literature searches, if there's some people that would be willing to look at it to see whether we are being comprehensive and casting a wide enough net. Two is to look at what we're identifying and say, well, you know, not this, but this, or if you know things that we're missing, letting us know. I mean, I'm just an email away, or a phone call, or a tweet. So, I mean, you know, we're trying to be as comprehensive as possible, but we're pretty sure we're probably missing stuff. But when you notice we're missing stuff, or you want to work with us to do that, we're certainly open to that. I mean, I think as we start to work more closely with the WinTAC and the YTAC and all the centers you're going to hear about tomorrow, I think some of that will happen. But our charge from the beginning has been to identify and push out evidence-based and promising practices. We are not experts on WIOA. That's the WinTAC. But within that, you know, that's just part of, you know, identifying the knowledge development piece and then the knowledge translation piece, trying to push that out. So also making sure that as you're talking to people about practices, evidence-based practices and practices with the best available evidence in vocational rehabilitation, that you point them to our website and to the matrix.
Thank you.
Thanks. You get a 30-minute break. It's a good deal. Thank you for coming.